The Catholic Church, I mean, you've heard of it, right? It's been around for 2,000 years, shaping so much of our world. But what is it really? I mean, when you get past the headlines and the history class version, how does it actually work? How does it operate as a system of belief, a legal powerhouse, and a global voice all at the same time? Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull back the curtain and try to deconstruct this ancient, incredibly complex institution piece by piece.
All right, so to really get our heads around the church, we've got to start with a question that's, fundamentally human. It's that search for meaning. The church basically sees itself as trying to answer that deep, nagging feeling we all get, that thirst for purpose, especially with everything going on in the world today.
And look, this idea isn't some new marketing slogan. This comes from a huge moment in the church's history, the Second Vatican Council back in the 60s. That was when they basically tried to figure out their place in the modern world. And this quote, it's amazing. It frames their whole mission not just as a religious thing, but as a service to all of humanity, to provide reasons for life and optimism. I mean, that's a pretty big, profound goal to set for yourself, right?
And let's be real. Doesn't that feel incredibly relevant right now? The church's own documents talk about the anxieties we all feel, the constant competition, the noise from media, just the pressure of it all. And in the middle of all that chaos, you get that one nagging question. Seriously, where is all of this going? That's the exact question the church says it's trying to answer.
Okay, so if the big problem is this universal search for meaning, what's the church's actual solution? What's their answer? Well, that brings us right to its foundations of faith, a very specific path built on some core spiritual beliefs.
So, at its absolute core, the answer is what they call an encounter with the living God. Now, that might sound a little abstract, but it's not just an idea. It's a practice. It's something you do. It happens when you proclaim the gospel, when you celebrate the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, when you genuinely try to live like Jesus taught, and when you stop and think about God's role in history. So the key takeaway here is that it's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of things working together to help people find that meaning we were just talking about.
Okay, but think about this for a second. How on earth do you organize a global community of over 1 billion people around these beliefs? You need some kind of structure, right? You need an operating system. And for the church, that system is its very own, very ancient body of law.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. We're talking about canon law. And it's not just a book of religious rules. Get this, it is the oldest continuously functioning legal system in the entire Western world. That's wild. It works on principles of law a lot like a civil system does, and it provides the internal rulebook for, well, everything, from how sacraments are performed to who owns church property.
And this system wasn't just written down one day. It's been evolving for centuries. I mean, it started way back with these ancient laws that were kind of scattered all over the place. Then, in 1234, they finally collected and organized it all for the first time. But the first really modern code, that didn't show up until 1917. And the codes that are in use today, they were only put in place in 1983 for the Western Church and 1990 for the Eastern churches. So you can see it's truly a living, breathing legal tradition.
So, we've got belief and we've got law. But holding all of that up is this absolutely massive intellectual tradition. You can think of it like a living library of theology, philosophy, and teachings that has been growing for 2,000 years.
And you can really see this intellectual tradition in two main ways. On one hand, you've got these huge, comprehensive resources like the Catholic Encyclopedia. It's designed to be the go-to place for, full and authoritative information on pretty much anything and everything Catholic. But then, on the other hand, you have papal encyclicals. These are specific letters written by popes to tackle timely issues, everything from workers' rights to the environment. So one is like a giant foundational database, and the other is way more targeted and right in the moment.
And this is actually a brilliant way to understand how the church organizes all this knowledge. It's not just one giant, intimidating library where you're left on your own. There's a real structure to it. You can start with the basics, the simple definitions. Then you can move on to apologetics, which is just a fancy word for learning the answers to common questions about the faith. From there, you can get into more spiritual reflection. And then, if you're really ready, you can dive deep into the official church documents themselves. It's like a built-in roadmap for learning.
Okay, so we have this incredibly deep well of faith, law, and knowledge. But how does all of that actually show up in the modern world? Well, it plays out in a surprisingly diverse, dynamic, and, let's be honest, loud media landscape. There's a whole spectrum of voices out there.
So for example, take a publication like Crux. Their whole tagline is taking the Catholic pulse, and that's exactly what they try to do. They focus on top-tier, journalistic coverage of the church around the world, and they often have this really deep inside the Vatican perspective. They're basically trying to report on the institution as it is, right now, tracking all its moves and decisions.
But then you have a totally different voice, like the National Catholic Reporter. They call themselves the independent news source, and they're really known for having a more progressive point of view. You'll often find reporting and commentary there that's pretty critical of the church hierarchy, and they put a huge emphasis on social justice issues, all from a faith perspective.
And then, on a whole other part of the spectrum, you've got a publication like 1 Peter 5. I mean, their mission is right there in the slogan, rebuilding Catholic culture, restoring Catholic tradition. Their focus is laser-sharp on traditionalism, on the Latin Mass, and on fighting for what they believe is a restoration of a more classic, unchanging Catholic identity.
So what you get when you put all these voices together is this really vibrant and, yeah, often very contested public square. These outlets, and a ton of others, are basically where the big arguments are happening in real time. They're debating tradition versus novelty, different ways to tackle social justice, how the church should even be run, and yeah, even the nitty-gritty of how worship should be done. This is basically the church thinking and arguing out loud for everyone to see.
And all of this leaves us with one huge central question. We've just walked through an institution that's defined by this deep faith, governed by an ancient legal system, with this incredible library of knowledge. And yet, in our modern world, it speaks with so many different and often conflicting voices. So the question is, how does a 2,000-year-old institution find a single voice in a world that is constantly and dizzyingly changing? That right there, that might just be the central challenge it will always be wrestling with.